Thanks. Today we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and its role in protecting healthcare networks in cybersecurity. As we all struggle to meet the demands of changing economic conditions as well as changing threat landscapes, we all have a shared responsibility to protect our healthcare system from cyber attack. Many of us are looking to our priorities and wondering if new technology such as AI is going to help us in that pursuit. And I think one of the major things to first demystify is the role of AI within cyber tech and understanding its maturity across different technologies, where it's applicable and where it isn't. I think that when most people think of AI, they think very similar to this meme where they may overestimate the ability for it to replicate a human mind, or the idea that it's just simply a data analysis tool, a function of graphing in 3 dimensions, specific trends or predictions. IT always sees it as the new hot thing, right? Everybody has heard about the big data warehouse and big data and how important it is, and transforming those words into AI and machine learning has left a few to say, well, as you start to embed that across every data sheet, is it really true? Is this something that is providing value, or something you're using just to, claim competitiveness? When you also hear it from your CIO and they see the price tag, most of these technologies, especially if they're allowing you to build ML, are quite expensive, right? Big data, big dollars, and so your CIOs are usually sort of taking a second look at how much these tools and processes are going to cost. Certainly, if you think about it from an IT security perspective, many believe that they are understaffed, underprepared for an attack from a 0-day that is using automation, it is using a lot of AI in themselves, and that without the tools to combat the adversary, they're not going to be successful at blocking the next attack. And so today we want to share a little bit about our own views on AI and where they belong within your stack, and how they are to be prioritized when thinking about all the other conditions that you are trying to satisfy. When we look at the healthcare industry as a whole, many have been surveyed by different groups, and almost all come back with 55% at least in some surveys coming back and saying that the top target for investment in 2022 is going to be cybersecurity. That when you look at the way that investment is typically distributed, many users try to work backwards from ransomware, right? And they try to think about, patient healthcare information lost or systems brought down. And so it's no surprise that when surveyed, and many of them, 46% are investing in database security, where the health records are actually stored, looking at data loss prevention to try to lock down any loss of information against the HIPAA security rule. They also think about training and education, and of course making sure that people can't be phished, that everything from COVID pandemic scam emails to potentially fraudulent calls from patients are all interpreted as potential training for the variety of staff we have in the institution. We also have a concept that our endpoint is sacred, that the 26% of IT staff believe that their endpoint is a critical component to invest in when thinking about cybersecurity. And logic follows, right? If you can only run software on a device, right, on a laptop, a tablet, or a server, right, then it makes sense to protect those with an agent, right, and probably more than other places. So when you think about the role of AI, it's important to understand, how does it help over time across those different areas, right? When we look at those sort of disciplines where we're already investing, is AI going to accelerate? Is it going to replace something that we're already doing? And so it's important to think about one factor of AI as being sort of more mature, right? When you look at a lot of artificial intelligence, categories, and where the science is in terms of its maturity, its ability to go to market, basically what we call feasibility. Is it easy to implement? Is it something that's going to meet our business need because it's mature to keep aligning with that? You see that machine learning comes up time and time again as one of the components of AI that actually is favored very strongly in 2022 across a wide variety of different software. And so when we think about the role of AI in cybersecurity, we more specifically think about machine learning, right? And so it's helpful to deconstruct, specifically over the last few years, what machine learning has been able to accomplish, how it works, just so that we can understand if it's applying to a particular technique in protecting us in cybersecurity or enabling us in terms of predictions, right? Because at its heart, it's really about making predictions, decisions. And so when we think about the concept of machine learning, I think a lot of people would sort of default to a picture of a graph, or developers, like we said in the meme, think of some sort of AI program or AI programming language that they're familiar with, Python R or something, right? And looking at how that can be applied, it's helpful to understand what kind of things it consumes, right? First, most of those machine learning algorithms are there to basically make decisions in trees, in some cases, looking at fields, which usually means they're consuming metadata. Not in all cases, but in many, they're not actually taking, full files or, new patterns, et cetera. They're trying to take big data sets and make conclusions about a particular outcome, right? Is there going to be malware if the file name is? Is there going to be malware if the time of day is, right? And sort of matching these different factors from structured or semi-unstructured data that you're going to be collecting, right? Which is why when you think about a lot of your cyber technology, most of the AI and ML, discussions are around analytics tools, right? They're typically showing up in your security information and event management products. They're showing up in your endpoint detection and response products. And that's because those tools classically have made decisions based on that data in the first place, and machine learning simply augments or adds that capability in lieu of something like a flat file signature detection, where you're just looking at the actual records, right? So when we come through and start to say, well, that's great, but that's quite generic, is there a way we can actually take a lot of the features that we know are going to be enabled through machine learning and prioritize the ones that are going to have the greatest impact, either because they have better business value and they're more feasible, or frankly because they're the best place to apply that technology, right? And so when we think about the scheme of applying machine learning into the environment, the best thing we can do is to use a ranking system, very similar to like a RACI chart or a SWOT analysis, right? How do we take the feasibility? How do we take the business value, and how do we aggregate the cybersecurity AI or ML and use that specifically to say which features are sort of the best, so that we know how we're ranking them when we're either going out shopping or trying to determine ROI on a particular system that we buy. And so Gartner's developed actually one of the more interesting ways of stack ranking these capabilities. And what they've developed as a pyramid is basically an ability for us to rank from top to bottom. So it's very visually simple to follow this chart. But what it also does, based on the research, is give us the answer as to where ML would be best served within our environment. And so when you think about things like being able to look at transaction fraud detection, right? Transaction fraud detection, by any other name, is really back to the database security that healthcare is investing in, right? And it so happens that that's a very valuable place for AI and ML to play a role, right? File-based malware detection, right? If we're worried about our endpoints and looking at the files that people are clicking on, or our adversaries deploying onto our servers and workstations, being able to analyze the file and its behavior in memory and kill it, it offers a very good alternative to typical signature detection and antivirus, right? Also, if we think about things that probably don't have a very valuable alignment to business case, things like security risk posture scoring scores very low, right? And the reason is that that there's not that much more business value necessarily, and it's not as feasible to implement something like that. And so when you think about your vulnerability management program or typical cyber risks aligned with other HIPAA security role process risks, right? Your typical risk rating charts and risk management plans, applying AI science directly to that isn't going to see a massive benefit in the way that it's consumed. So I think one of the major things that most IT security directors, CIOs, can start to focus on within machine learning is direct applicability. Which ones of these things are enabled in the technologies that we already have, right? Which ones can we continue to seek when we look at new technology or new trends, and applying them correctly. I think that when many people start to invest in clouds. It's helpful to understand the role of account takeover protection, account and takeover identity, and the role of protecting something like the cloud, right? It's one of the few things you do have to protect in the cloud, because you no longer have to protect the operating system, which may belong to your SaaS provider, right? Or if you're IaaS, right, you have infrastructure in the cloud. Understanding that the workload is one part of the protection, and then the other part is that they can get access directly to the hypervisor through the admin console, right? So understanding those trends, understanding that there are sort of a top 10, sort of identity, file-based analysis, process analysis that makes machine learning quite successful is very important. And then the next thing is to say, well, how do you rank it? I think a lot of people are sort of wondering, what are the things that are still left over when we do invest in something like this? And so what's important to understand that consuming this technology in and of itself doesn't really do much, right? There is still custodianship. You still have to manage something. Now, I think the job changes when you use machine learning, and it's there to enable better predictions. It's there to enable better accuracy. It's there to adapt, quite frankly, to the changing techniques of the adversary. It is still our responsibility to test that, right? We need to make sure that we are simulating real world controls and validating that those things are true. So if you have file-based analysis that's supposed to stop malware, can you test that? Can you validate that that is exactly what the software or the service is actually doing? Do you have an ability to look at which gaps are, bypassing this? If it's about account takeover, could you, simulate an account takeover from another system and see whether that particular protection triggers, right? And so it's important to say that the job left for IT is still to validate the claims. False positives are a great way to rank whether or not the system is as accurate. It helps tell the difference between two providers that may have the same capabilities in machine learning, that have obviously similar data sheets, similar description of file analysis. You'll see this a lot in the antivirus world. When you go to refresh, your AV, and they start to talk about next generation AV, a lot of it will start to talk about the behavior engines and the ML that it's built into the product to find and stop things. Well, the false positive rate is going to be a very important way of understanding this, and testing is going to be the thing that's going to bring that to light. The second thing that is still, of course, responsibility of IT is vulnerability management, right? We are not still getting away from patching. It would be nice to say that AI could go and do our job for us, and that it had some sort of way to make decisions on whether the system was going to break if you applied the patch, and apply the patch, and healthily test that it was come back up and do it again. That would be I think a few years out, but certainly vulnerability management, configurations of our systems, segmentation, they're all part of the design of your setup, right? When you build a network, when you build these systems, it's so key to protecting them from cyber attack that, a lot of the fundamentals for many, many years have not changed. And so this is still, of course, part of the program. What's becoming more important than simply designing a convenient flat network and looking at, the ability to protect it from using patching, is to agree that even without a patch, even without a missing vulnerability, this system is still at risk. And that cybersecurity hygiene is coupled with vulnerability management now that allows you to separate these systems from each other and make sure that they are not able to communicate. They don't share credentials. In many cases, they're locked down in terms of their own policies on the system. And so that's a very important part of addressing vulnerability management on the days that you're not informed by a vendor that there is a missing patch, right? That's what we call hardening, right? And so that's still a responsibility of the end user, of the admin. And so we want to make sure that when you are given an application, it is very clearly understood exactly how to lock that application down on the system so that it can still function, but that you're not having a wide open operating system with a million different opportunities for an attacker to take control of it. And lastly, we still need to continue to invest in education and awareness training. This is still a place where machine learning and AI science are, developing between certain learning management systems, certain, phishing awareness, security awareness testing systems. This is still, considered not necessarily a massive improvement or differentiator. It does not, necessarily improve your scores. It doesn't necessarily improve the tests themselves. And so when you think about the applicability of something like machine learning here, it is still a job for the security practitioner to go and provide this education and awareness training. You are still a better teacher than the ML, and is still a better an analyst than a typical machine learning program or AI analysis of the same results, right? And so I hope this was informative, and that many companies that are looking to protect their systems understand that there are ways to try to build machine learning that are probably profitable for their bottom line. When you look at healthcare surveys and they talk about cybersecurity targeting, there's certainly a lot of other healthcare systems that follow after that can leverage machine learning. And so I would say that the same type of analysis applies to those technologies as well. If you're a CIO and you've got a very diverse portfolio of systems coming onto your desk to say, whether or not this project or that project is worth taking on within the budget, the same matrix can still be applied to healthcare tech and machine learning within it. Not just cybersecurity, and the same patterns still apply. It's not like, if you're doing something for chronic disease management and the machine learning algorithm has a particular level of accuracy, that testing that accuracy, labeling those results isn't going to be an important part of validating whether using a system like that is important, right? And so, or valuable. And so it's important to understand that the factors about what make machine learning and AI science develop over time and become more mature are true for all of them, and that you have the same ability to measure the results and outcomes of that across different domains. Cybersecurity is no different, and that your existing mission to protect against the adversary is enabled with better speed, better accuracy, a little bit more adaptability than your traditional science. And so it helps you essentially more or less sit still on certain factors and have them adapt automatically, as opposed to constantly worrying and surveying different areas, monitoring. So again, I hope this was very helpful. Again, my name is Adam Mansour. I'm the Chief Security Officer at Act Zero. And we have, of course, a booth within the show. And so we would encourage you to stop by, maybe pick up some of the materials in terms of the tests that we talked about, so that you can essentially, get there faster. Thanks very much, everyone, for your time.